and it is a great pleasure to be with you this evening. This is Coffee Chat, and I get a chance to talk with two big fans of the Erie Philharmonic. One is Brigit Stack. She's such a fan that she actually works on the staff of the Philharmonic. She is marketing manager for our orchestra. And we're also here with Adam McClelland, who is a member of the Board of Governors for the Erie Philharmonic, which is one of the governing bodies for the Philharmonic. We could probably get into that today too, just so you know what we're talking about. But first of all, welcome to you both. It's great to have you here on Coffee Chat.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Brigit, why don't we start with you? Your association with the Erie Philharmonic dates all the way back to
2017.
Well, way back in 2017. I can barely remember it, but
I know.
It wasn't that long ago, actually. You came to us from Allegheny College, I think. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I graduated that May, and I got the job at the end of May, so it was really quick, and I was here all of a sudden.
And did you start right away in marketing, or did you have some other duties as assigned?
Yeah, our staff is very small, as many people know. We are 6 people full time, so I do a lot of marketing. Also, you'll get me on the phone for tickets and other things like that. So the titles kind of show our specialties, but at the same time, we're all doing so many other things, especially when you come to a concert and you'll see Adam and I and other staff members just around the lobby. So it's definitely a varied job.
I'm sure people recognize you from the lobby at the Warner Theater, but do you remember the first time you heard or had any connection with the Philharmonic?
Yes, actually. I wish I had brought it because it's over across my living room, but I have my free Erie Phil voucher that I received in college, actually, that I didn't get to use, but I kept saving it for whatever reason, which now I see as a sign. But I still have it. So we always had tickets when I was there. That program is still running. When I was there, we were given those, and I couldn't make it up for the concert. So that was really the first knowledge I ever had of the orchestra, because I'm from Northeast Ohio. So we were, much more connected with the Cleveland Orchestra, and didn't even know that there was an orchestra just about an hour away from where I lived as well. But I certainly remember that voucher, and I'm really glad that I hung on to it, and it's hanging up on my corkboard in my living room still.
A bit of an unused souvenir. That's kind of
Yes, I'm really glad I didn't use it, because now I have to keep it. So
really cool. Adam, do you remember the first time you heard the Erie Philharmonic?
Vaguely. It was quite some time ago. In my case, it was youth concert in the early 90s. My parents tried to make sure that we got out to those, and it was a combination of open rehearsals and the youth concerts. AJOA was conductor back then, so it was I want to say it was 93. I could be wrong. It's been a while.
So tell me about your musical background. Did you play a musical instrument growing up, or did you just have a love or a passion?
No,
How did you...
I'm a music enthusiast. I tried playing an instrument and decided to quit murdering pianos and recorders. That's what I started on. Gave up because yes, my teacher didn't want to. No more. But it's still imbued me with a love of music in general. And my mother kind of fanned that. She's a huge classical music buff. While she may not talk about it much, she very much is. And she kind of got me started down this road. And so I continue to pursue any orchestral event I can find, mostly the Phil. But
how about you, Brigit? Did you have a singing or an instrumental background?
Instrumental. I didn't play an instrument until I was in 5th grade, which is usually when you get introduced to band instruments, wind instruments. And I started playing then, and I did it all through high school and college. And I never really, for a while, I thought that's what I wanted to do, was play in an orchestra. My high school orchestra used to do the Nutcracker every 2 years. They would do the suite of music. And I saw it on TV, and I told my mom that that's what I wanted to do when I was older, because the Nutcracker is just magical. And so I wanted to do that. That just was what I wanted to do. And I also went to the youth concert when I was in 6th grade with the Cleveland Orchestra. So that was amazing to watch in person and have them showcase how amazing they are at playing their instruments and putting on a show. And then I just sort of chose different routes academically, and realized that I really loved playing and I always wanted to do that. And I still perform with like other groups in town just so I can keep playing. But I realized that my skills elsewhere were also useful, and that orchestras had a staff who actually helped put on the shows but weren't on the stage. And I thought it was like a perfect marriage of not performing for a living but still getting to be around it. So it was really like the perfect timing too. I didn't realize that until my senior year of college. So it took me a while, but I'm glad I found this, and everything really, like the stars aligned for this to come into my life for sure.
That's wonderful. Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your day job. I know you, of course, have a passion for the Philharmonic and what we do in our concerts at the Warner Theater, but what is your area of expertise?
Well, I work in computers, technology, various computer technologies. My primary role is as a server and storage specialist at Networking Technologies, which is a local business here in town over in Mill Creek, although at the moment we're all scattered in our home offices. I basically spend my days working in things like Office 365, various enterprise server platforms and their accompanying shared storage platforms. And I try to make everything work that allows businesses to function. In the role that I serve, I'm not I'm a one portion of a larger team, and yeah, that's what I do day in and day out. In fact, that server you see there behind the box, down on the corner, that is a decommissioned server that came from a client that moved on to bigger and better things, and it just sits here waiting its next task. That's what I do today.
And are there any are the companies that you work with located in Erie, or are they based all over the country?
The tri-state region. We have an office here in Erie, and we also have virtual offices in Buffalo and Cleveland, and we do a lot of work in the New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania area. Obviously, we don't get as far down as Pittsburgh and PA yet, but we're northeastern Ohio and southwestern New York, and we serve a lot of different portions of the industry. We get into healthcare, medical. Well, healthcare and medical are the same thing. Education, small businesses of various sizes, manufacturing. We're kind of all over the map in that regard because, well, technology is everywhere and increasingly so. The company was founded here about 1999, so a little over 20 years ago, and it started out serving the Erie area and has since expanded.
And so, how has your work life changed as a result of COVID? I mean, can you still accomplish the things that you can accomplish, or are you kind of missing those these opportunities that you would have to have kind of day-to-day interaction with your coworkers?
Well, that's one thing we all certainly miss. We have a pretty close-knit team. The owners, they can refer to as one happy family, and we have a lot of fun in that regard. So yes, we kind of miss interacting with one another day to day. But as far as the actual work goes, a good portion of what I do day to day is done remotely anyway. I'm sitting in my home office where I've spent the last 4 months or so, with very few exceptions, working full time right out of this room. I'm very fortunate in that regard to be able to do so. We do have some cases where we have to physically go on site to rack a piece of equipment in an equipment closet, or make some physical connections that our on-site contacts can't manage. Or in a lot of cases right now, the on-site personnel are reduced, and so we have to go on site and do stuff ourselves that we might have asked someone else to do, and save everyone the expense and time of traveling. But it hasn't changed my life too much professionally. My location where I work has changed. Has been the biggest thing.
And I imagine you're just like the rest of us, living our lives through Zoom at this point and communicating with clients and coworkers that way. A
combination of various tools, but yeah, Zoom certainly, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Teams. Microsoft Teams is one of the biggest ones for my colleagues and quite a few of our clients. But yeah, that's pretty much our lifeline at this point.
Brigit, how has your life changed? I mean, has your work life changed a lot because you're working out of your home office?
It is different because we don't have shows to put on, and right. So it takes a huge chunk of our responsibility away, which is our time on the phones or in person with patrons, which you I know we all realized how much of our day that was, but when it's completely absent, it's very odd. We also, in our office, are mostly open plan area, so I'm usually seeing another person all the time. And I only get to do that if we do a video chat now. So it is weird because we also all live downtown and we're like just that far away, but we're all separated. And it is just different to not be in the office. But it really has been a smooth transition. It's not like that disruptive. I think just what we do is different now, as we also get into next season.
Right, exactly. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about music, because you both have a passion and a love for music. You both have some favorite composers, I know. Brigit, why don't we start with you? Can you name your top 3 composers and maybe pick a piece by one of them?
Oh, yes, I can definitely do that. If I had to rank them, I would really say that my first favorite has become Louis Moreau Gottschalk, who is an American composer. And then I would probably say that Shostakovich and Tchaikovsky are really fighting between second and third place because I love them both a lot.
I've got to ask you about Gottschalk, because I think a lot of our viewers will not know about him, or will maybe have just had a passing acquaintance.
Yes.
Can you recommend a piece or some pieces that you really like?
Yes. So one of his pieces that I think is one of the most common is called The Union. And it was, as some background, he is a Civil War era composer. So a lot of people would know maybe that piece because it is a compilation of some Civil War songs. It was written in defense of the Union Army and what it stood for, even though he was from Louisiana. So it was a statement for someone from there to say that. He also performed it for President Lincoln, so it's pretty cool, pretty special piece. He's a pianist, so a lot of his work is written for the piano, but he also had a lot of pieces that were written for piano and orchestra. You can find both. But he traveled a lot to South America and a lot of the islands down there too. So a lot of his music is actually... The Union is very American, but for the most part, his music is very much inspired by South America. So he has a piece called A Night in the Tropics, which is the first thing that ever made me fall in love with his music. It has 2 movements. It's really not that long, but it's one of the first pieces that has a samba rhythm written for orchestra. So obviously he didn't invent that rhythm, but he put it into a composition. And so it's very fun. The second movement just makes you want to dance. It has a samba, so of course it does that. So those 2 are certainly my favorites. He also has a piece called Bambula, ! So any piece that has an exclamation point in it is, of course, it's going to be fun. But he traveled the world playing piano because he was a sensation back then. He had some groupies, even though it was 1860s. I'm actually reading a book about him right now too, because I don't know enough about him. And he actually, when he passed away, there was a cartoon drawn in, I don't know if it was an American newspaper or not, but it shows 3 people mourning his death, and it's supposed to represent Brazil, the United States, and I cannot remember the other country. But he was really one of the first world-renowned people. And there's something really simple and just fun about his music. And his 100th birthday is coming up not too far in the future, and I would love to see people actually celebrate his music and make it more well-known, especially because he's an American, and I just never heard of him until a few years ago. So
that's so cool.
Oh, he's the best.
So it's a bit of a leap, though, to go from Gottschalk to Shostakovich. What about Shostakovich's music?
I love Russian composers. I think there's just something about their music that's all in or nothing. It's just exciting. And I think that Shostakovich, even though his life was pretty horrible, because of that, we had some really expressive music. And it's like terrifying to listen to and think about why he wrote it or when he wrote it. Like when we did the Fifth Symphony this past year, and he wrote that in response to being denounced by Joseph Stalin, who's not the person you want to upset about anything. But I read a book about the two of them and their relationship with each other because it's fascinating. But it was just such a scary time for him to live through. And the fact that he outlived it and his music did is just, I've always been a history buff too. So the fact that he was alive in a really rich period of history with like the Cold War and World War II, and wrote so much about that time period. There's so much available to read about. And I think I like knowing all these things about him. And I don't know, it's just some great
How about
music.
a signature work, one that you really think is kind of ultimate Shostakovich?
I like the 11th Symphony. It's terrifying. It's about the storming of the palace when they still had a czar, and it's about the year 1905 and that rebellion.
U2 fans would recognize it as Sunday Bloody Sunday, right?
Yes. And what culture doesn't have a Bloody Sunday somewhere in their history? I thought there was only one, and then I learned that there were like three. But yeah, it shows one of those, and it's also got bells at the end, these huge bells, and it ends with a bell ringing, and there's nothing more terrifying than hearing that at the end of a piece. But I like music that's
a
dark.
Signature Shostakovich piece. It's got everything in there that has all that stark Soviet power and aggression, yet despondency, sorrow, deep sorrow, suffering.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned suffering as being a good motivator for passionate music, because Tchaikovsky certainly fits that bill too, doesn't he? I mean, in his own way, he certainly had enough suffering in his life that really, I think, spurred and motivated a lot of incredible music.
I know, and his music is so much more, like there's more magic in it. There's scary parts or dark parts, but there's also part like the Nutcracker. Everyone knows the Nutcracker. It is an essential part of Christmas for so many people. And it's when you hear it and it's so that beautiful, like that's why I wanted to keep playing music, because I heard that and I was like, I want to do that. I want to play that and do that for other people, like play it for them. And there's... I think
Tchaikovsky would probably be amused to know that a lot of people know him today through that ballet music.
The saddest thing about his life is that he just didn't think highly of himself at all. He just didn't think he was worth, or his music was that good. And you can read a lot of his letters because there are books of them published and translated between him and his patroness who supported him financially. And she was always trying to tell him that he was great and that this music was so good. And I mean, I'm glad she existed, and he existed for as long as he did in writing stuff like that, because it's some of my favorite stuff to play on my own too. And when we did 1812 Overture, another classic thing that everyone knows, that's like the triumphant soundtrack of almost every 4th of July concert ever. And ironically, because that's nothing to do with the 4th of July at all. And it's not even about our 1812 war, which I thought it was my whole life. So that was eye-opening too. But it's just, he knows how to put on a show with music, and you can't go wrong with doing any music from him, because it's just so...
Those are great picks. The Gottschalk is definitely an off the beaten path selection.
Yes.
But there are definitely plenty of things to listen to from all three of those. Adam, how about you? You can choose. Your favorites can include those three, or how about you? Do you have a top three?
Not really. I have a much longer top list. I'm not as focused, certainly. I mean, I guess if I were to put it into a category, it would be large orchestral works. Okay. While I do enjoy good chamber music, I also like the stuff that leaves you sitting in your seat with your ears ringing, which did actually happen once. So of the composers that I guess are my go-tos, like when I'm working around the house during my regular office day, I'll listen to well, actually on the weekends when I do a lot of baking, I listen to the Brahms' entire symphony cycle, and I've done that forever. Yeah, I very much enjoy the works of Brahms, and there's a lot of interesting stuff around that. Particularly how good they are, and how late he came to the game in his own life, when he finally got around to finishing the first. I mean, 14 years—it's a long time, and to come to something when you're in your 40s, and like, well, yeah, here's my first symphony, so there's that. The symphonies of Brahms, I really like the first, but I also love the fourth. And the symphonies 2 and 3 in particular, it's one of those funny things where, hey, what did you do on your summer vacation? Oh, well, guess what I did? I wrote a symphony. Beat that, because symphonies 2 and 3 were written on vacation, and were both excellent. The fourth was written, of course, at a very sad time in his life. He was facing his own demise through a terminal illness, and there are those that say that it was Brahms shaking an angry fist at God. And it definitely comes out in the music, and I believe the music benefits from that. And there's a lot of great performances of it, and I have yet to hear one that I don't like. But one in particular, I like the works of Otorino Respighi quite a bit. Not just the Roman trilogy, obviously, but one of my favorite musical stories about the Roman trilogy for me personally. There have been very few times in the years that I've been sitting in concert halls listening to great orchestras play music. There's really only 3 of them for me: the Phil, the Pittsburgh Symphony, and the Cleveland Orchestra. But anyway, this was a concert in Cleveland, and Welser-Moos decided to do the Roman trilogy as one concert, and they finished with the Pines of Rome, which, of course, Pines is not the right sequence, but it's a good way to end a show. I have never been physically uncomfortable in a concert hall before, or where I wanted to cover my ears. But it was the first concert that the Norton Memorial organ had been brought out of mothballs. It had been restored, and it was back. And it, of course, had been banished from the stage famously by George Sell. He never wanted to hear the thing, and Christoph von Dochnani didn't want to hear it either. So they barely used the thing. So they restored it. Welser-Moos brings it back out, and the orchestra decides we're going to do Roman trilogy to kick this thing back off. So anyway, they're building up to the climax of Pines, and I was sitting. We were a few rows back from at the edge of the balcony section. Then there's that hallway there in between balcony and then dress circle. Well, there was a brass ensemble, of course, in the balcony playing 2 people that were in the back row of dress circle, whom I assume have gone deaf, or did at that time. And hopefully they got their hearing back. But anyway, so we had that going on, and there's a lot of elements that came together. It was perfection, but it was shockingly loud as they got closer to the end. And by the time that they finished, my ears were ringing. And then, no one let them off the stage with less. I think it was like 5 curtain calls. It was nuts. But that was a memorable Respighi performance. But another piece of his wasn't even his own work. It was a transcription of Bach's Passacaglia and Fugue, which I enjoy immensely. And then as far as like a third composer, I would group a bunch of the Russian masters into one category by themselves, Tchaikovsky being one of my big ones. I also adore Rachmaninoff. One of my first concert experiences outside of the Phil was, about, 8 or 9 years ago, maybe a little more, in Cleveland in Severance Hall. I went there by myself. This was before my sister decided to join me at concerts, which she does regularly now, which is a lot of fun. But the first thing I saw was Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony, which I had read about, never heard it. And one of the things that I try to do before any concert, whether it's Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or Erie, I try to listen to the pieces that are on the program so I know roughly what's going on, and then I can pick and choose some things out of the performance as I'm sitting there listening to it live. I didn't prepare for this one because I wanted to be surprised. And it was a wonderful performance. But then I read up on the symphony and what led up to its composition and the state of Rachmaninoff's life when he put that thing together. And it's astounding that he made such a comeback from a very deep depression and a terrible mental illness to produce that and the second piano concerto. Even after the first symphony critically flopped at the time, although I've listened to it, I'm not really sure what what the critics hated about it. But
my take on it is that it wasn't even his fault. I think it was just really very poorly put together and poorly conducted, and I don't think it was given nearly the attention that it deserved. Because you're right, it's not a laughable piece at all. It actually sounds to me like it would fit very nicely next to the Tchaikovsky symphonies as
absolutely
the brilliant, beautifully orchestrated Russian symphony.
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's a wonderful work on its own. I've not heard that one performed yet, but I hope to one of these days. I've heard the second piano concerto and the second symphony. Love them both. And it was a lot of fun to hear. We've heard it a few different times, but yeah, it's if it's on a program somewhere nearby, I try to go if at all possible. But the works of Tchaikovsky, there's a lot of them that I like. I really like Romeo and Juliet. But who doesn't? Who hasn't heard that?
Yes.
Another one that I hadn't heard that you kind of introduced me to, because and I think I might have told you this before, Francesca da Rimini was I had no idea that thing existed, and when I first heard it, that very stormy night at the Warner Bros. Almost shook the building to pieces. That was quite the thing. That's another one of my memorable moments in a concert hall where hell winds are firing away on the stage, and the winds outside are trying to knock the building down too, because why not? That is an astounding work, and I've listened to multiple versions of it, and I would say that the Phil's performance of it is definitely my number one. I wish it was recorded somewhere because it was fantastic. And there's many other works of Tchaikovsky's, of course. I love his Fifth Symphony. Well, everyone likes 4, 5, and 6, obviously, but the fifth one is particularly good. My sister and I saw Long play the first piano concerto in Cleveland a few years ago. And if you were to ask my sister if there's a particular soloist who can play the first piano concerto correctly, it will always be Long and no one else. We heard Carol Gearstein perform the original version of the piano concerto with Cleveland once, and that performance was written off because it's not real. Those arpeggios in the beginning, no, that's fake. Sorry, try again. Also, be long. And I like his second piano concerto as well, which doesn't get anywhere near as much attention, but it's equally lovely.
I mean, everything he does is worth putting
absolutely
time to. But I have a question about the organ concert. Do you remember what year that was, or roughly what year when they brought it back out and were using it?
I would have to actually pull the program out of the drawer behind me to figure it out. It was within the last 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Because I haven't been going to concerts in Cleveland much more than 8 years or so. But yeah, I want to say it was within the last 5 years or so.
Okay, because I remember at the youth concert, they cleared the stage of the entire orchestra just to show us that organ. And they did Toccata and Fugue, and I flipped out because I was so excited. Because it's in Fantasia, the Disney movie, and I knew it from that, and I was so excited, and none of my fellow sixth graders were excited about them playing that. But I was like, this is the organ song. This is the song you're supposed to be able to play on the organ. It's quintessential. And I can't believe that they weren't using it. It's amazing to have as part of the stage just there.
Yeah, and I don't know what kind of shape it was in that prompted its restoration, or how often it had been brought out. But that was my first time seeing it was with Pines, and yeah, with where Fantasia is concerned, what was Stokowski thinking? Picking he picked one of his own transcriptions of Toccata and Fugue. Obviously, it was his show. But oh man, what a barn burn of an organ piece that is.
That whole piece also should have been an indication that I was going to work for an orchestra. Was when I was in elementary school, I sat through the entirety of Fantasia because it was so exciting. It has the Nutcracker, and that's the first time I ever heard the Nutcracker was in that movie. And I think that's a lot of people's first time hearing it and seeing the little fish and the fairies and everything. And it's just like, this is magic. This music is magic.
And if Ducasse wasn't famous before Fantasia, he certainly was afterwards.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's just amazing how many people learn about classical music through other sources, whether it's a commercial or you hear a really beautiful soundtrack to something and you want to know, oh, what is that? I want to know what composer that is, or what piece is that? Do you guys have any advice for somebody who loves going to the Phil, isn't interested in classical music, but is just kind of intimidated by the sheer number of choices? And I mean, is there a good source to go to? Do you guys belong to a subscription series, or do you follow anything online, or is anybody out there blogging about classical music that you know about that would be interesting for people to kind of get their feet wet? Big world.
I mean, I would just say you can call the office and talk to me, and I will talk about anything. And I'm joking, but also not, because we get line for the season. The first thing I do is see which ones I know and then which ones I don't know. And I do love looking into those and figuring out all of that history and stuff behind it. And I'm usually one of the first people to know this is when this was written and this is what was happening in the world or why it was written. I mean, truly, I just like talking about that stuff. So anyone is welcome to just call the office and talk to me. But I honestly think because computers and the internet are just so prevalent and in our hands or just right in front of us all the time, I just like going down the rabbit holes of Google and Wikipedia, because that's how you find those short little bits of trivia. And there are a lot of websites or documentaries too that I found that are just dedicated to somebody or to their work. Because I don't also want to tell people just to go get a book out about Brahms, because you have to really love a composer to read through an entire book just about them. But I found that I just like searching for those things and then, getting interested in this bit of history and then like following those clicks through while listening to it too, or just like putting it on too. But I know that they're intimidating to a lot of people because we know music and we know how to play it or read it. But I think I'm so attached to film music and film soundtracks too, that when you listen to it, it's also really interesting to not know anything about it and think about what it could be the soundtrack of. Like the 11th Symphony, it sounds like a film soundtrack, but it was not for a film, but it could be. And I think there's a lot of music like that, where people just don't feel like they're going to get it. And because you and I can talk about Allegro and no one's going to know what that word means or something. So it's tough. I wish there were more places to just go. I even got a book it's supposed to be about music for non-orchestra people, and I can't even understand some of it. So whoever wrote it was clearly not in the best, like they're not very colloquial about it. They're using terms that I know that no one would know unless you've played an instrument at least through middle school or high school, So.
How about you, Adam? Is there a source or a go-to place you like to go to learn about new music or explore?
Well, I mean, obviously, here in the Erie area, we're fortunate enough to have an orchestra in our backyard. So, of course, you could call the office, go on to the website, eriephil.org, and just start checking stuff out there. Or even find the app on the App Store, because there's stuff tucked away in there that you can listen to. Some of it's historic. Well, I think most of it's historical recordings of the Phil itself, right. Which is a lot of fun to listen to, whether you're new to the orchestra or not. But one of the things that I do this little music appreciation thing with some friends of mine every Sunday evening, and how I started the process of getting them introduced to classical music, concert music, was I walked back the music of films. Start with movies, and go backwards from there. And a prime case for that, of course, is just pick any John Williams score. We started with Star Wars because they're in this case, this group of children, their dad is a huge fan of Star Wars. That was an easy thing to start with. They were well familiar with it. And a lot of the stuff that Williams was inspired by from that were things like Walton, Wagner, and Richard Strauss, a few others, which they were already using, George Lucas was already using as music on set before there was a score. So he already had stuff, ready to pulse by family. Right. So that I think that's an easy gateway for anybody who wants to learn more about any of the classical music. Is start with films and work backwards.
Or that also helps you find out what you like too,
right,
because
right.
Williams, especially, the one I always think of was Jaws, and New World Symphony, the fourth movement, begin the same way.
They do. Yes, they do.
If you like stuff like that, then here you go. This is what you want to listen to.
And when movies came out from their era, and the talkies moved away from like Wurlitz or organs in a hall like the Warner Theater, the orchestral scores that directors were listening to at the time were the big orchestral works from the late Romantic period and the early 20th century period. And when they found composers to write music, they were telling guys like Franz Waxman and his colleagues, hey, we want this to sound like this Rachmaninoff piece over here. How about that? That's which like I said, it makes it very easy to start with film music and work backwards. It's all there.
I think it's great advice. I think you should start with what you know and start with what you love and use that as a point of departure and kind of forge your own path. There's a really wonderful book. I don't know if either of you ever came across this. It's called Who's Afraid of Classical Music? And it was by Time Magazine classical critic, Michael Walsh. And that was his whole point was, you find something you like, and there's very likely 5 branches that come off of that particular tree, and you can kind of make your own way. Beyond the classical music world is immense, staggeringly so. I mean, there are people that are fans of chamber music and love to go to string quartet concerts. There are fans of opera, and that's a whole other world unto itself. There's art song, there's solo piano literature, there's of course the orchestral literature, there's music that spans all the way back to the Renaissance, and then the Baroque is really when you start to get groups that really function as orchestras as we know them today, all the way up through classical and romantic in the 20th and 21st centuries. And now the repertoire is staggering. There's just so much to grab onto and so much to listen to that it really behooves all of us to kind of find pathways through it all that are connected to the music that we already like. And I think that's how I started to make my discoveries and forge paths that way.
I think honestly, where I learned new pieces so much was actually by using services like Pandora or Spotify, because when I was in middle school and I started using, and then I made a station for the Nutcracker. So then I kept hearing other pieces. The only reason I know about Gottschalk is because of that streaming service. I had something on one day and one of his pieces came on and it just stopped me. And I was like, I have to know what this is. And that's how I found so much, because even when you're in high school or if you go through college, you don't necessarily even get to play all of those pieces. When you're in band, especially when you're not playing a string instrument, and if you don't have hands in an symphony orchestra, then you just kind of get pigeonholed into band repertoire, which isn't necessarily then performed by an orchestra in town. And I think just letting it randomly give me music is how I found so many things. And honestly, like just putting that on in the workday, like what Adam's saying, or when you're baking, then you will notice when you like something, you will stop and want to know what it is. And that's what happened so much to me and how I found so many things.
So in terms of creating playlists for yourselves, do you ever actually kind of create playlists and put things together that you like, or do you prefer the streaming service where it's more choose the adventure for you and you just kind of go along for the ride?
I will say if you put Tchaikovsky on, you're just going to get the Nutcracker a lot because they think that's all you want. I one time got the same song like 3 times in a row, because the other thing about the classical music world is that if your favorite band has an album, they're most likely the only person who did that song and that album. If you like the Nutcracker, there are hundreds of albums of different orchestras playing it.
Right.
So it thinks it's randomized. It's not. But if I want to listen to Shostakovich, I know that that's what I want. And so I like to go by, once you know composers a bit more, then I know I can just put that on and that's what I want to hear. But I also remember in college just putting on like the Planets suite of songs, because it's like 40 plus minutes of music. And if I haven't finished my homework by then it's a good time filler, and you don't have to think about what song you want to hear next, because it's just going to keep
it's about to come.
Doing it. Yeah.
How about you, Adam?
Well, my methodology is similar. The streaming services these days do make it very easy. I got started on CDs, so what I tend towards is I'll find a CD that I like. I'll start with that as like a reference recording, and then I'll take the same piece and I'll go explore conductor orchestra pairings and try to find something different.
They're all different.
They are very much
different.
so. Well, one such piece for me is Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov, and one of my favorite recordings of that is by Fritz Reiner and the Chicago Symphony, and it was one of those things. And it was even noted in the CD liner notes that everything just came together just so one day, and it just something happened, magic happened, and they turned out this astounding recording. It's this towering work. It's fantastic. So anyway, it's a lot of fun to go find. Pick for example, Shostakovich. That's another fun one. Go find a Russian conductor with one of the world's big orchestras. Take like Vasily Petrenko, Valery Gergiev, somebody like that, and turn them loose. Find an orchestra that they play with on the regular, and listen to one of their performances. And along those lines, Leningrad is probably one of my favorite Shostakovich symphonies.
The book about that one.
Well, that there is. But that's what I do. Conductor orchestra pairings. I'll pick one of my favorites and turn it loose and see what happens.
The biggest piece that you can find, I think, the most variation is 1812 Overture, because there are cannons and bells, and my favorite is to see what they end up using when they do the explosions or the bells. And there's so many different versions of that. And sometimes it's based on whether you're indoors or not, because like we had a recording of a cannon, I think. Obviously we did not have a cannon inside the Warner. And we had little sparklers.
Yes.
But and then we had our bells that we normally have. But when I've seen them do it outdoors and someone's in a church tower, like ringing the bells, and it's totally different when you watch different versions of that on YouTube, and you will lose an entire night of just listening to those.
Oh, just the 1812 alone, yeah. And of course, the association of the 1812 and Independence Day with Arthur Fiedler and all their stuff that they do right on the river there. I actually had to ask Wally Foss once, what would you suggest? Someone who's been in classical radio for a very long time, what recording would you suggest for the 1812s? I figured he would know, obviously.
He has one.
He does, and one of the ones that he recommended, he couldn't remember the label or the orchestra, but he said if you find it, it will be noted in there that it was done outdoors. It was a live performance in Moscow or St. Petersburg, and there were actual church bells, and they subbed cannons for these very large rifles, and it is an astounding recording, and it is one of my favorites. Although as far as the performances of the 1812, one that sticks out in my head was one that the Phil did, and you may remember this, Daniel. The howitzers were firing towards the lake, of course, and the wind picked up, and all the smoke from the howitzers decided to roll back over
right across the amphitheater.
Yep, music was flying everywhere, but everyone kept playing. It was as if nothing happened. Everyone, I'm sure, was coughing, but that was that was quite something.
Look, the only time I got to see it was when we did it indoors. And I'm sure Adam remembers this, but I love that recording so much. As soon as the song ended, I burst into tears.
Yes, quite true.
It was so great. And if a song has an ending that's just like, bam, triumph, then I loved them. Like, that's my favorite kind of music, is just no like little note that just kind of like goes off into the distance. This is like, it's done. Get up and clap. Just do that.
Well, you two know this. You know that we, as musicians and as performers, we feed off of that. We live for those moments when the music that we're playing connects with you in a visceral way, and that people either are just left aghast and can't clap because they're so emotionally drained, or they just have to burst out of their seats because the performance was so inspiring and so life-altering. And it's those kind of moments that we miss, of course, in this pandemic. But boy, I'm glad that you both have a spirit for the music and have a love for the repertoire. And as you say, there are incredible examples, recorded examples out there of some of these great pieces that are so worth investigating, whether it's just, as you say, going down that rabbit hole on YouTube or enjoying one of the streaming services, or there are certainly some pretty rabid fans in Erie that are very happy to share with you their knowledge and their expertise with their record collections. But that's the thing about this music. You can go as deeply as you like, and learn as much as you want to about the composers and the situations under which these pieces were written, or you can just sit back and relax and let it wash over you. And both are equally valid experiences with classical music and everything in between. And it's a lifelong pursuit. And I love that you both are kind of committed to that and such passionate fans of classical music. Brigit, Adam, it's been a real pleasure to get to talk to you. Thank you for sharing your time with us here on Coffee Chat. And I hope it's not long before we see each other all again at the Warner Theater and enjoying another great live performance of the Erie Philharmonic.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, sir.
Cheers to you both, and thank you so much.
Yep, thanks, Daniel.